never has it been a better time that if you were the creative sort for you to start a business and make anything really. And that's what I wanted to talk about today because it's my personal experience right now, very directly. It's what I'm dealing with. And I've been able to observe a number of characteristics in the world, you might say, that make this especially true. And so, where to begin? Why? Why is it like this? And then how, if you were the sort of entrepreneurial type, could you go about taking advantage of the situation that we now find ourselves in historically? So I would start with, I'll just start with some of the reasons why I believe that this is true currently. And then I'll talk about how you can go about making use of them, as I have so far, to progress as far as I have with my company and with the team that I'm working with. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the abundance of skilled people that exist currently. So there's never in the world, and this is me, I'm talking about creative things as they relate to development, coding, creating applications, creating software. So it is a little bit more that specific niche, but there's a lot of variety within that. You know, there's no limit or particular way that you need to make an app. It could be in education, it could be in science, it could be in recreation, but it is that. Although I think it holds true of many vocations, so there might be a little parallel. So to start with, it would be the depth of skill that's now available, and also the number of people who are skilled. So there has never been on planet Earth so many skilled people in terms of development. There's never been so many iOS developers. There's never been so many user interface UI specialists. There's never been so many marketing experts. There's never been so many social media managers. All of these vocations are highly saturated because they've had enough time to mature. I'm fond of always talking about that my dad was I call him like a first generation programmer. And I love the story that he told me when I was younger, that the first time he saw a computer is when he was in university, and that computer occupied several rooms. And you can imagine that it has, I don't have my phone with me here, but it had 1/1,000,000th of the computational power of what you can now hold in like an iPhone SE or something like that. So that was the beginning, and we have progressed so much beyond that now. And you can look around and see this as well in the way that education and priorities for the way that people like this are employed has changed. It used to be that the only place that you could get an education in this, as it was for my dad, would have been in a university. That's the place that was vetted, had the right courses to teach you, had the information available. So pre-internet, well, that obviously underwent a rapid transition as soon as you had the internet, and then you had the explosion of availability, of the democratization of information, that it was available to anyone. And so another explosion of those who would develop, those who would have the skill sets to do this kind of thing. And it's gone even further, where that changed access, at least initially, to the amount of information that you had available to you. The internet evolved, that there was obviously a pre-YouTube world, there was a pre-video sharing world, where that went through a huge tectonic shift, and all of this having the increased snowball effect of more freedom of information, more self-education, more developers, more creatives. And then it goes a step further and a step further. So one of the other ways that we saw education change, and it's not new now, I didn't date this for the video, that might have been an interesting element of it, but that you have boot camps. For example, like a boot camp that I went to. Those boot camps didn't exist so long ago, depending on how long your measurement is, but all of it contributing, snowballing, to have the effect that whether you wanted to self-educate or go through a formal institution, that you had this available to you. You could in ways that you never would before. You have websites like I used before I went to the boot camp called the Odin Project. And this straight up takes you through step by step how to get acquainted with HTML. There's courses on JavaScript. There's courses on Ruby. All of this information is available to you now. And where it definitely was before that it mattered that you had some sort of prestige educational background backing you up, because that's all that was available. And then people would measure, how likely they could trust you based on that institution. It really doesn't matter now. I almost think of it like what matters about being a carpenter is that you can build the deck, that you can build the house. And so it is the results of your skill set that matter, and that's what people measure you by. And that's how people are measuring others right now in terms of getting a job, especially for development. So yeah, it's cool if you've got a big fancy resume with a bunch of fancy educational institutions on it, but companies now really just care if you can do what it is that they're asking you to do, because that's what matters. That's what drives for their progress. It does not matter to them one bit that you have a fancy educational institution on your resume, rather that you could do the work. And so this has shifted. It's like development almost feels more like trades now to me, in the way that with trades, the measure of your success is whether you can do it or not the shiny resume that you have. So we have that. Now, that's one element, one pillar you could talk about, is that we had this huge explosion in the availability of information and a sort of shifting in values in terms of what is the reason that you might get hired to do something. But then we can now go on a tangent of, well, that's all fine and good. We have these people in greater numbers than we ever had before. Well, then there's the interlocking systems of connection that if you did want to get a community of creatives together, as I say, whether it was marketing, whether it was in development, whether it was creatively, you can find them. You couldn't before. Now, social media isn't a new thing, relatively speaking, but these systems like Well-Found, like LinkedIn, that are specifically dedicated to it, they're another part of the puzzle, that you could go to these and find like-minded professionals to create something with, are fantastic and an incredible resource. Now, let's go into, maybe you might say the less, it's one of these good-bad situations. So if you're staying abreast of what's going on in the development world, right now, there's huge layoffs. You could argue this is like speculative, but I think it's an interesting angle to approach it from. If you looked at what happened to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, where old Elon went in there and then overhauled the hiring structure, or who was currently working there, and they had to, I don't know if you'd say prove their value or not, but then they'd be able to continue. And he ended up downsizing, or the technical jargon word they would use is a reduction of force of some insane amount. And that in itself is like its own interesting discussion, where what I've learned about this is that actually for a lot of these companies, their stock prices were dependent on showing certain market characteristics. And so it had shifted from producing an excellent product to showing market metrics, which would then increase the stock price. And one of the greatest measurements to indicate whether your company was in a good position and then should therefore be worth more was how much you were hiring and how large your staff was. And so a lot of these companies were hiring unnecessarily to inflate this metric that it might have an impact on your stock price. And then you would have, for example, bloated creative teams. So you would have within a user interface department, you would have like 5 people dedicated to button design. Do they really need to be doing this? No, but it looks really good for the company to be able to say that we're growing, we have this large staff, and therefore our stock price should go up. But rather than go that route, old Elon, he went the route of that's just simply not efficient, and forget the stock price, let's build a more efficient product, and then axed everybody. And then you saw, following suit after that, there was a great deluge of firings that were going on in all the major tech companies. So whether it was Facebook, whether it was Google, whether it was Apple, all of these companies went through this like stripping down process. And that seems to be the case of, not saying it's directly now when I talk about this next portion related to the stock prices, but so many tech companies did this. And now you have all of these people I was just saying that were able to educate themselves and add to the job pool. And you have all of these incredibly experienced people in some cases losing their jobs. And so now everybody's free. Not free in a way that they might like, but they are not working or are between jobs. And this is one of the huge things that I've noticed now, is that whether it's like a good bad thing or a bad good thing, that if you are looking for talented people, believe you me, there is way more than before, because so many people have lost their jobs. Now, what is another really important characteristic of this is that these are not like an individual losing their job in an unbenefited position. People that are laid off from Google, people that are laid off from Facebook, they're getting these things I've heard about called severance packages. Now I might make a joke, but it's true that it's not equivalent to somebody losing their job at the mill. Maybe they have a severance package, but it's no Google package. But what this means is that you have people highly skilled, finding it difficult to get a new job, but that are in a more sustainable position if they wanted to focus on something else. And so, if you have a compelling enough idea that you want to work on, there are way more people in the world now that not only are they educated, not only are they really skilled, but their life situation affords them the opportunity to consider a longer view on something if it seems like it might have legs. And so all of these things coalesce together that you have a talent pool at an extremely unique position in history that we've never had before, that you could call upon to build something with. And then you have, as I mentioned, this sort of underlying infrastructure of collaboration to get in contact with these people that is developed in a way that it hasn't before. It's been my experience when I am looking for people to join the team that we get flooded with applications. Like, I thought it was a bit of a far cry. Like, are we really going to be able to find people who want to work with the company in this particular niche? We're a startup. Everybody's 100% remote. That's another element of it, is just how potent remote working is, so that you can have these interlocked international teams, and that's no problem at all. Well, all my fears were laid to rest. That as soon as I started to put out these job postings and look for people, we were crushed under the weight of how many people would apply. And it's great. And so I want to encourage you. I don't know how many like younger, like maybe in 20s or whatever, watch the stuff that I make. But if you were ever considering, like, I got an idea, maybe this could work, I absolutely think if you can find a way to balance it with a stable monetary situation where you've got like enough of a day job that you've never been able to start a company like you can now, because you can leverage Well-Found, you can use LinkedIn. And also, there's so many people that have enough financial stability that might assist you, because they're coming off of, like, everybody's lost their job, but it's sort of the golden spoon lost your job, or the silver spoon, because it is not a desperate situation that many of these people find themselves in. They're like, I dream of what it would be like to get laid off from Google for the sort of financial stability. Like, if you get, I don't know, a year's severance or something, or half a year, whatever the package might be, for these kind of people, it's approximating to something that others would maybe work for several years to make. And so if they take a year off, they're not going to be drowning. They could totally redirect that energy to something that they see in a long view, meaning that they could become fabulously wealthy, never have to work again, or only ever choose to work from the perspective of, I'm really into this and I would love to dedicate my energy to this. So I say it's for tech, but I believe that you could find this in any number of ways for creative things that you want to do. And now that remote work is so popular that people are used to this, like post-COVID or whatever, you've got people very comfortably working and maybe more naturally. Like I've noticed in some of the interviews that I've had, especially with younger people because it's their first time entering into the workforce, that the only jobs they know are remote. That's all they've ever done. I thought that was kind of interesting, actually, speaking to, I'll say at least one, where she had said that that was her case when I asked her, what is a good work environment for you where you feel like most engaged, most passionate about what you're doing? Doesn't matter if it's a remote example or an in-person example, just whatever makes sense for you personally. And they then said, oh, well, I've only ever worked remote, so I guess I have to use that as my reference point. I thought that was kind of funny. So now I want to talk a little bit about not just, as I say, that this is the case, that you have laid off, talented, stable people looking for a way out from the matrix, but how do you go about getting your idea up and running? And this relates to building your team, like very specifically how you can look around to do it. So what I would suggest is that if you've got a good idea, there's sort of a foundation that you need, which I would say is you got your CEO and you've got your CTO, and they could potentially be interchangeable. But the idea is here that, well, I am non-technical. You must have with your founding partners, if you're going to go the route specific to myself, you do need someone who is extremely technical. And I would recommend for somebody in this role, it's someone that doesn't actually, specialization would not be the key here. It can be that they were in development and they spent a lot of time on many different projects. So that could have been web development, then they built a few games, then they did a little bit of machine learning, then they did, I think I said web development, then they did Android, and they get this wide range of experience so that if that CTO, your chief technical officer, needs to speak to different teams, that they can have a more meaningful conversation. Because the last thing you want is that you can be fooled by those that you're trying to collaborate with, that because you don't have enough insight into what they're talking about, they could string you a line. If they were late for something, you just have to trust them, take them at face value. And trust is good, but trust is earned. And having that this is where jack of all trades is actually very useful. And why you need them is to keep people honest in the technical partners that you bring in to build things. So if you have two technical founders, if you had a founder, the CEO, that was technical and then another one was, that's fine too. Also it exists, and I'm the living example of this, is that you can have a technical and non-technical where this person could be very conceptually strong. They know absolutely everything that they want to do. They just need that technical muscle to be able to back it up. So you can survive without the person being just conceptual, but you can't survive without a person being extremely technical. So all I'm saying in this point is that if from the start you need at least one truly technical person, and that technical person should have a broad range of skills or have a broad range of experiences within tech. And then for your other founding partner, that they could be either or. They could be purely conceptual because that's taken care of, or they could have a highly technical background and then you're just reinforcing each other because that's the case. But it's really important. I could not stress that enough. I could not do what I'm doing without our CTO. So very grateful for that fact. Now, what's really important about this is it's building the snowball. So the next part of this is that you can do this all without cash. This is another thing now that I don't think you could have done before. Like, again, it would be the sort of silver spoon startup, or at least that's my experience, where you were already working in Google, you knew the right people, and then you got a whole bunch of investment. Well, the majority of us are not in that position, and so you need to do this in the absence of cash. Well, what do you have? You have equity. Equity is, it's the business. It's the business cut into however many pieces of a pie that you want to separate it into, but it is ownership of the business. And this is what you have to work with if you don't have cash, but it is incredibly powerful, because this in the long term will be far more rewarding to people if you have a very successful business than in the short term. They make some couple $1,000, you know, whether it's 50,000, 100, or 250, that will pale in comparison to people that you can get to understand the long-term view of what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and if you have a very successful company. So this means that you can start a company and you don't need to have $3 million ready to pay a bunch of developers the sort of salaries that you would see expected of them with, like full-time work commitment that they're doing. The only way, though, that equity is going to work is if people believe in the project. It is not as simple as saying, these are not the same people. One who say that they're trying to bring you into the team and they're going to offer you company ownership, and it seems all smoke and mirrors. They've talked to you vaguely about the product that they want to build. They've alluded to some of the features that might be in it, but you don't have a very strong sense of what it is that they're trying to accomplish. So why then would you want a piece, or would you believe in the equity value of that company? So what I'm saying here is, you do need, in the absence of money, a very clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish. And once you have these 2 points come together, you have your 2 founding partners, and you have the one very strong technically, you're building the dream. And what you're going to see after that is that you can now, because you have those 2 people and because you have a very clear vision, when it was just you, how much is that equity worth to people? I don't know if I really want to own 10% of a company where it's just this one dude. But I might want to own some percentage of a company where I can see that, these 2 guys together have a very clear vision and a very solid technical background, a technical background that could lead. Maybe I will join that. And then what you're doing is you're building that momentum, that if you can impress upon someone that this really has value, that we do have a clear vision, that we're going to go about this the right way, and we have the foundational technical skill that will allow us to achieve it, getting that next person is way easier. And then once that person joins your team, maybe you went from there, you thought, well, we definitely need to have someone who is artistic. And you do. I would say the only thing after your CTO would be, or the most important places are going to be development, so like your coders, and then your artists. Those artists and those coders are going to believe in you more when they see those base pair in place, and then it is the others come into place. So just this, you can see what I'm building here, that if you had your base pair and then you manage to get in a great lead engineer, so they are going to code, but they're going to lead the coding, how much more likely is it that you're going to have the next person believe? And then how much more likely is it that you'll have an art department that'll believe? How much more likely is it that anyone will believe now? So it's this build the dream. I really do believe now, because we don't all have cash. We don't have millions of dollars stored away. And that should not be a block to us to be able to pursue creating companies. I've found that so many people are looking for this opportunity right now. It's like, I've got all these skills. I often, I'm speaking from their perspective. I work in a soulless environment where I see one little piece of what it is that I'm building. I have no personal ownership of that, because it's simply these lines of code that I'm interested in, or this one little piece of art. And everyone. It's an innate human experience to desire purpose, and there's a lot of people in that position now that would join a company for equity if they saw it having real value. So that's what I advocate for. That's what I've done. Now, it's really important when you get into it that you continue to lead, that you continue to provide strong vision. You definitely don't want to run in the direction of, oh, now I'm surrounded by these wonderful people to take care of things that I don't need to continue to provide structure. You are acting as though you're paying these people, $250,000 a month. You are acting like you've already got the audience, like they're ready to sign up, but they just need the application to be able to do so. You are treating it seriously, if not more seriously, I would say, in the absence of all this cash. Like, I've heard so many stories now, like funding can be a bit of a curse in some ways because it's all too easy at that point to just waste away the money and rest on your laurels that you've now you're making as a CEO. You're making, like, because you got investors, and as I understand it, this would be like a low wage, like $70,000 a year. And they're just happy to kind of float along because I got money in the bank. This will take me through to this time. It looks really good on my resume to be building anything. And so how seriously do I need to take it? Where when you go this route, the only way that people will stay is if they believe that their sweat equity that they're putting into this means something. So you got to treat it very seriously, but maybe that goes without saying. But this is the track that I suggest. And so I think that resources for finding that first business partner, search for it in your immediate social group is perfect. That's a great option that you have available to you. And then if you really must, I would branch out from there. But the more personally you can know somebody that you know that they're a great friend to you, that's ideal. But again, that person who, let's go the quantum entanglement route, like the moment that you're thinking of that other person where you're like, if I only had a business partner that could bring to fruition this great idea that I have, they're out there and they're looking for you too. They want to find you too. So ideally close personal connection, but if you have to use something like LinkedIn, you have to use something like Wellfound, you have to use something like, honestly, YouTube. You could make videos where you're like, I've got this great idea. I'm looking for a partner to do this in. Kick off a relationship with somebody, and then, it'll be one of these situations where it's always in looking back that you can't imagine having never found that person. And I know that because I've experienced that with basically everyone who has joined the company up until this point. I cannot imagine not having met these people, and it is only through this work that I have met them. And they were, as I say, it felt like waiting for me out in the ether, that if I could just reach out, they would find me there. And what I'm speaking about here is just how natural the collaborative fit is. I've always said it's interesting. I've now seen this, it's in business and it is in our personal lives, that if ever I saw a friend that was struggling with a relationship, I'd always said to them that the thing about relationships is they're easy. The obfuscation is actually that they're hard. Any relationship that I've seen where somebody really enjoys it, goes on for many years, it's so natural. It's like, yeah, of course these people make sense together. They're great from the start. And it's effortless for them. They just fit together like two pieces of a puzzle. And then the people that I see struggle in relationships are always one that element was there. It was that, oh, we got to fix this. We're so good, but we don't match up in this way. If only this way, then we'd be perfect. And it goes on and on and on until some miserable disillusionment. So when things fit, they fit. And that can be this North Star to you, that if you meet somebody and you're like, I don't know, probably trust your gut feeling that that's not the route that you should go. But equally, you are going to reach out and you are going to find people that you just match with. And you're like, how did this, just as within a relationship, it's like, I feel like I already know you. And that is an incredible experience. Of course, it's great intimately, but it's really good creatively and collaboratively. And I think it's just the nature of human relationships. That's why you notice it intimately, but also in the business world as well, because this is actually how people work. They're either at odds or they're in conjunction with each other. They're aligning well with each other to do whatever it is that they want to do. So that is a final piece I would give a suggestion for how, when I search out these relationships, do I know that they're the right ones? They'll feel right. And they will be shockingly so, I think, from the onset, that you get that kind of weird itch, that weird feeling like, how is it that I didn't know you? How is it that we have this rapport and it's not born over years, but in the first 20 minutes of speaking to you? Trust that. Trust your gut. That's another thing that I can say. So you find these people, you build the snowball of belief, and you can do so through equity, and you can find it through all this plethora, this myriad of different interconnected social media, job posts, all these kind of things. Like, there's tons of people, there's tons of ways to connect with them, and there's never been so much skill on the planet Earth as far as I'm concerned, and never so many people, which is just a matter of fact. And the more people you have, the more people you have wanting purpose, and the more people who will appreciate that you've reached out and kind of answered this same call that they have. Thanks for checking this out. I appreciate it. It's been fun to post more videos recently. Again, more great feedback, cool comments on the last video. I've been getting some cool ideas that I write down into my notepad. This is one of them. I was like, I got a comment on the fact that this, more than any time in history, has got to be a great time to start a business. But I'm getting all sorts of ideas again since that can of worms is opened. If you have any questions, write me. I always appreciate those. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that I catch you again in the next video. And that's all for now. Hug the ones you love.